What if I told you that Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, left behind urgent warnings about 3 specific signals from the spirit realm that most people completely ignore? And what if these signals could literally save your life or transform your spiritual destiny forever? Before we dive into these life-changing revelations that could revolutionize everything you thought you knew about spiritual communication, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because this information could be the key to unlocking your deepest spiritual potential. Have you ever felt an unexplained chill run down your spine in an empty room? Have you ever woken up at exactly 3:33 a.m. for no apparent reason? Have you ever heard your name whispered when no one else was around? Keep these experiences in mind, because what you're about to discover from Edgar Cayce's authenticated readings will completely transform how you understand these mysterious encounters with the unseen world. Edgar Cayce wasn't just another spiritual teacher making vague predictions. Over 43 years, from 1901 to 1945, this remarkable man gave over 14,000 documented psychic readings while in deep trance states, accessing what he called the universal consciousness. Every single word was recorded by professional stenographers and is now preserved in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, Virginia. But hidden within these thousands of readings are urgent warnings about spiritual signals that Cayce said would become increasingly important as humanity approached a new age of consciousness. Here's what will shock you about Cayce's approach to spirit realm communication. Unlike modern spiritual teachers who speak in generalities, Cayce provided specific, documented cases with names, dates, and verifiable details. When he warned about ignoring spiritual signals, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing actual documented incidents where people's lives were dramatically affected by their response, or lack of response, to messages from the spirit realm. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal 3 specific spirit realm signals that Cayce identified as critical warnings that no one should ignore. First, the midnight awakening phenomenon that Cayce said indicates your spiritual guides are trying to deliver urgent messages about your life path. Second, the repetitive number sequences that appear when the spirit realm is attempting to redirect your destiny before you make a catastrophic mistake. And third, the most powerful signal of all, the one that Cayce said appears only when your soul is being prepared for a major spiritual initiation or life transformation. But here's what makes these warnings absolutely crucial for our current time. Cayce predicted that as we entered the 21st century, the veil between dimensions would thin dramatically, making spiritual communication more frequent and more urgent. He warned that souls who ignore these signals during this transitional period could miss their greatest opportunities for spiritual evolution or even face serious consequences in their physical lives. Let me share with you a documented case from Cayce's files that perfectly illustrates why these signals cannot be ignored. In 1942, a businessman from Norfolk, Virginia, came to Cayce desperately seeking guidance. For months, he had been experiencing the same disturbing pattern. Every night at exactly 2:47 a.m., he would wake up feeling an overwhelming presence in his room. He would hear footsteps in his hallway when everyone else was asleep. Most unsettling of all, he kept seeing the number sequence 444 everywhere he looked, on clocks, receipts, license plates, and even in his dreams. Instead of paying attention to these signals, the man dismissed them as stress from his struggling business. He even visited doctors, convinced he was having some kind of nervous breakdown. But the signals only intensified. During reading 1847-2, Cayce revealed something that changed everything about how we understand spirit realm communication. The spiritual guides surrounding this man had been desperately trying to warn him about a business decision that would have destroyed his family's financial future. The 2:47 a.m. awakenings weren't random sleep disturbances. They were precisely timed spiritual interventions. The footsteps weren't hallucinations, but the actual presence of his deceased father, who had been a successful businessman himself and was trying to guide his son away from disaster. The number 444, according to Cayce, was a specific code meaning divine protection and guidance during times of crucial decision-making. Here's the remarkable part. Once the man began paying attention to these signals and following the guidance Cayce interpreted from the spirit realm, his business not only survived, but thrived beyond his wildest expectations. Within 2 years, he had built one of the most successful enterprises in Virginia, and he attributed his success entirely to learning how to recognize and respond to spiritual communication. This case demonstrates a profound truth that Cayce emphasized throughout his readings. The spirit realm doesn't communicate with us for entertainment or curiosity. These signals appear when something significant is about to happen in our lives, when we need protection, or when we're being prepared for our next level of spiritual development. But wait, there's something even more extraordinary about how these spiritual signals work. Cayce revealed that they operate on what he called spiritual timing, which is completely different from physical time. A signal that appears today might be preparing you for an event that won't manifest for months or even years. This is why so many people dismiss these experiences as coincidences or imagination. They expect immediate, obvious connections between the signal and its meaning. In reading 5749-7, Cayce explained that spiritual guides communicate through what he termed the language of symbols and synchronicities. They can't interfere directly with our free will, but they can arrange circumstances and create patterns that catch our attention if we're spiritually aware enough to notice them. The key is developing what Cayce called spiritual discernment, the ability to distinguish between meaningful spiritual communication and random occurrences. Here's where this gets really practical for your life right now. Cayce taught that everyone, regardless of their spiritual development, receives these signals. The difference between people who benefit from spiritual guidance and those who struggle through life making the same mistakes repeatedly comes down to one thing: recognition and response. Think about your own experiences over the past few months. Have you noticed any recurring patterns that seemed too frequent to be coincidental? Have you had any dreams that felt more real than your waking life? Have you felt drawn to certain places, people, or decisions without logical explanation? According to Cayce's teachings, these aren't random occurrences, but potential spiritual communications that deserve your attention. The first signal Cayce identified as absolutely critical to recognize is what he called the midnight awakening phenomenon. This isn't just ordinary insomnia or stress-related sleep disruption. Cayce described specific characteristics that distinguish spiritual awakenings from physical sleep problems. The most important characteristic is the time consistency. If you're waking up at the same time, night after night, especially during what Cayce called the spiritual hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., your guides are trying to establish communication during the time when your conscious mind is least resistant to spiritual input. During these awakening periods, Cayce taught that your spiritual sensitivity is naturally heightened. The physical world is quiet, your analytical mind is less active, and the veil between dimensions is thinnest. This creates optimal conditions for receiving guidance, warnings, or preparation for upcoming changes in your life. But here's what most people do wrong when experiencing these midnight awakenings. They immediately try to go back to sleep, often becoming frustrated or anxious about their disrupted rest. Cayce revealed that this resistance actually blocks the spiritual communication that's trying to reach you. Instead, he recommended a specific protocol for maximizing these spiritual contact opportunities. The moment you wake during these spiritually significant hours, instead of fighting the awakening, Cayce suggested entering what he called receptive consciousness. This involves lying quietly, breathing deeply, and simply being open to whatever impressions, thoughts, or feelings might arise. Don't analyze or judge what comes through. Just receive and remember. Many of Cayce's clients reported receiving profound guidance, creative insights, and even warnings about future events during these midnight awakening sessions. Some received detailed information about health issues before they manifested physically. Others gained clarity about relationship decisions or career changes that proved to be life-changing when followed. The second critical signal Cayce warned never to ignore involves repetitive number sequences that appear in your daily life with unusual frequency. But not all number patterns carry the same spiritual significance. Cayce identified specific sequences that indicate direct communication from spiritual guides, and understanding these codes could literally change the trajectory of your life. According to Cayce's documented readings, the most powerful number sequences are those that appear in groups of 3 or 4 digits, especially when they show up repeatedly within short time periods. In reading 39768, Cayce explained that these numerical patterns are actually a form of spiritual Morse code, with each sequence carrying specific meanings that correspond to different types of guidance or warnings. The sequence 333, for example, appeared consistently in cases where individuals were approaching major spiritual initiations or awakening experiences. Cayce documented over 40 cases where people reported seeing 333 repeatedly in the months before, experiencing profound spiritual breakthroughs, healing abilities, or psychic development. He explained that this sequence indicates the presence of ascended masters or highly evolved spiritual teachers who are preparing the individual for expanded consciousness. But here's what makes this information absolutely crucial for your spiritual development. Cayce warned that these number sequences have what he called expiration dates. The spiritual realm operates on precise timing, and if you ignore these numerical signals for too long, the opportunity they represent may pass. He documented several tragic cases where individuals dismissed these signs and later faced consequences that could have been avoided. Take the case documented in reading 2594-1, where a young woman from Richmond began seeing the sequence 911 everywhere she looked. This was in 1936, decades before 911 became associated with emergency services. She saw these numbers on clocks, addresses, receipts, even in her dreams. Instead of seeking spiritual guidance about their meaning, she dismissed them as meaningless coincidences. 3 months later, she was involved in a serious automobile accident that left her partially paralyzed. When her family finally consulted Cayce, he revealed that the 911 sequence had been a warning from her spiritual guides about impending danger. They had been trying to alert her to avoid traveling on specific dates and routes. The accident could have been completely prevented if she had recognized and responded to the spiritual warning. However, the story doesn't end there. During her recovery, the woman began studying Cayce's teachings about spiritual communication and developed remarkable healing abilities. She eventually became a spiritual counselor herself, helping others recognize and interpret signs from the spirit realm. Cayce explained that sometimes what appears to be a missed warning actually becomes the catalyst for an even greater spiritual awakening. The sequence 444, which appeared in our earlier businessman's case, carries what Cayce called divine protection energy. When this number pattern shows up repeatedly, it indicates that your spiritual guides are actively working to shield you from harm and guide you toward your highest good. But Cayce emphasized that this protection requires your conscious cooperation and trust in the guidance being offered. Now, the third and most powerful signal that Cayce warned never to ignore is what he termed the presence phenomenon. This isn't about seeing ghosts or having frightening supernatural experiences. Instead, Cayce described a specific type of spiritual encounter that indicates your soul is being prepared for a major life transformation or spiritual mission. The presence phenomenon typically begins with subtle sensations. You might feel like someone is standing behind you when no one is there. You might sense movement in your peripheral vision that disappears when you look directly at it. Most significantly, you might experience what Cayce called the watching sensation, a persistent feeling that loving, intelligent beings are observing and guiding your daily activities. Unlike the fear-based experiences often associated with spiritual encounters, the presence phenomenon creates what Cayce described as sacred anticipation. There's a sense that something momentous is approaching, something that will fundamentally change your understanding of yourself and your purpose in life. In reading 1472-6, Cayce documented one of the most remarkable cases of the presence phenomenon. A schoolteacher from Virginia Beach began experiencing these subtle spiritual presences in late 1943. She felt guided to spend more time in meditation and prayer, though she couldn't explain why. The presence seemed to be preparing her for something significant, though she had no idea what. 6 months later, she discovered she possessed extraordinary healing abilities. She could place her hands on people suffering from various ailments and channel healing energy that produced miraculous recoveries. Word of her gifts spread, and she eventually helped hundreds of people heal from conditions that traditional medicine couldn't cure. When Cayce investigated her case psychically, he revealed that the presence phenomenon she had experienced was actually a team of spiritual healers from higher dimensions who had been preparing her consciousness to serve as a conduit for divine healing energy. The months of sensing their presence had been a gradual attunement process, preparing her nervous system and spiritual bodies to handle the powerful energies she would eventually channel. But here's what Cayce revealed that will transform how you understand your own spiritual potential. The presence phenomenon doesn't happen randomly. It occurs when your soul has reached a specific level of spiritual development and is ready to accept greater responsibilities in service to humanity. These spiritual presences appear when you're being evaluated and prepared for what Cayce called soul missions, specific tasks that your higher self agreed to accomplish during this lifetime. The key to recognizing authentic presence phenomenon, according to Cayce, lies in the emotional quality of the experience. Genuine spiritual presences create feelings of peace, love, and sacred purpose. They never generate fear, confusion, or negative emotions. If you're experiencing spiritual presences that create anxiety or distress, Cayce taught specific protection techniques to shield yourself from lower vibrational entities that might be interfering with your spiritual development. What makes these 3 signals absolutely critical to recognize right now is their increasing frequency in our current time period. Cayce predicted that as humanity approached what he called the New Age transition, spiritual communication would become more common and more urgent. He saw that souls incarnating during this period would need constant guidance from the spirit realm to navigate the intense changes and challenges ahead. The Midnight Awakenings, repetitive number sequences, and presence phenomena aren't just interesting spiritual experiences. According to Cayce, they're actually emergency communication systems that activate when your soul needs immediate guidance or protection. Ignoring these signals during such a critical time in human spiritual evolution could mean missing your greatest opportunities for growth and service. But recognition is only the first step. Cayce provided specific techniques for responding to these spiritual signals in ways that maximize their beneficial impact on your life. The most important principle he taught is what he called spiritual reciprocity. When the spirit realm reaches out to communicate with you, you must reach back with conscious intention and gratitude. For the Midnight Awakening phenomenon, Cayce recommended creating what he called a spiritual bridge through conscious response. The moment you wake during these sacred hours, instead of reaching for your phone or immediately trying to return to sleep, spend at least 15 minutes in quiet receptivity. Keep a journal beside your bed specifically for recording any impressions, thoughts, or guidance that comes through during these sessions. Cayce documented case after case where people who consistently responded to Midnight Awakenings with this receptive protocol began receiving incredibly specific guidance about their health, relationships, career decisions, and spiritual development. One woman from Norfolk began receiving detailed instructions about herbal remedies during her 3 a.m. awakenings. Following this guidance, she not only healed her own chronic illness, but went on to help dozens of others with similar conditions. For the repetitive number sequences, Cayce taught a technique he called numerical meditation. When you notice a specific number pattern appearing repeatedly, take it as a direct invitation from your spiritual guides to enter into deeper communication. Find a quiet space, focus on the number sequence in your mind, and ask for clarity about its meaning for your life. Then simply listen with your heart, rather than analyzing with your mind. The key is understanding that these numbers aren't just random signs, but actual spiritual technology designed to capture your attention at precisely the right moment. Cayce revealed that your guides can influence the timing of when you look at clocks, notice addresses, or encounter these sequences because they operate from a dimension where time and space work differently than our physical reality. But here's what Cayce discovered that changes everything about how we understand spiritual timing. These signals often appear months or even years before the events they're preparing you for actually manifest. This is why developing patience and trust in the process is absolutely essential. The spirit realm operates on what Cayce called soul time, which prioritizes spiritual growth and divine timing over our human desire for immediate results. When it comes to the presence phenomenon, Cayce taught that acknowledgement is the most powerful response you can offer. Simply speaking aloud to these spiritual presences, thanking them for their guidance, and expressing your willingness to serve your highest purpose creates an energy bridge that strengthens the communication channel between dimensions. Many of Cayce's clients reported that once they began consciously acknowledging these spiritual presences, their guidance became much more clear and specific. Some began receiving detailed instructions through dreams, meditation, or sudden intuitive insights that proved to be remarkably accurate and helpful. However, Cayce also warned about the importance of spiritual discernment during this process. Not every spiritual presence that makes contact has your best interests at heart. He taught that authentic spiritual guides always encourage your highest good, never ask you to harm yourself or others, and consistently promote love, wisdom, and service to humanity. If you ever encounter spiritual presences that create fear, demand worship, or encourage actions that go against your moral compass, Cayce provided specific protection techniques. Surrounding yourself with white light, calling upon the Christ consciousness for protection, and firmly commanding any negative entities to leave in the name of divine love are powerful tools for maintaining spiritual safety. What makes these teachings particularly relevant for our current time is the acceleration Cayce predicted would occur in spiritual communication as humanity faces its greatest challenges and opportunities for evolution. He saw that souls incarnating during this period would need constant guidance from higher dimensions to fulfill their spiritual missions and help humanity transition into a new age of consciousness. As we conclude this exploration of Cayce's urgent warnings about spirit realm signals, remember that these communications aren't happening to you by accident. According to Cayce's readings, every soul that incarnates during this critical period in human history has specific gifts to offer and important work to accomplish. The spiritual signals you're receiving are designed to help you discover and fulfill your unique purpose. The midnight awakenings are preparing your consciousness for expanded awareness. The repetitive numbers are guiding you toward your destined path. The spiritual presences are supporting you as you develop the abilities and wisdom needed for your soul's mission. But none of this can happen without your conscious participation and response. Tonight, before you sleep, set the intention to recognize and respond to any spiritual communication that might come your way. Keep that journal beside your bed. Pay attention to the numbers that catch your eye tomorrow. Acknowledge any spiritual presences you sense with gratitude and openness. Your guides have been waiting for you to notice them, and now that you understand their language, your spiritual journey can accelerate in ways you never imagined possible. Edgar Cayce's warnings weren't meant to create fear, but to awaken you to the incredible support system that surrounds you every moment of every day. The spirit realm is reaching out to you right now, offering guidance, protection, and preparation for the amazing spiritual transformation that awaits. The only question remaining is whether you'll continue to ignore these sacred signals, or finally begin responding to the loving guidance that's been trying to reach you all along. If this information has opened your awareness to new possibilities, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos exploring more of Edgar Cayce's profound spiritual teachings. Share this video with others who might be experiencing these mysterious signals themselves. Your spiritual awakening is not just for your own benefit, but for the healing and elevation of all humanity. The time for ignoring the spirit realm's communications has ended. Your conscious spiritual journey begins now.